Hello and welcome to another episode of Amazon Ads News and Insights. I'm Sai, a partner marketing manager here at Amazon Ads. And today we're exploring something that I think a lot of advertisers are wrestling with right now, which is how to move beyond short-term ROAS and start measuring what really matters, which is the long-term value of your customers. To explore this, I'm joined by someone who works with this every day. Joseph La Selva is SVP at Perpetua, and I think he's really going to be able to give us some great insight on how the Amazon Marketing Cloud and partners can help brands make that shift. Welcome, Joseph.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
All right, let's dive in. So ROAS, it's basically the default metric for brands right now.
I think that it's been a go-to metric for so long, and it's had such a gravitational pull on the industry because it's simple to understand, it's intuitive, and it's easy to measure. But for those same reasons, it's limiting if you're trying to measure the effectiveness of your ad spend holistically. So if you think of what some of those limitations are. So first, it's primarily a last click attribution metric, which means any of your bottom of funnel investments by nature are going to look much more effective. You're not going to allocate budget higher up into the funnel, the mid and high parts of the funnel, because they're not going to show as good of a ROAS. And that's a misalignment for how you should be thinking about your ad dollars. In addition to that, ROAS is only going to look at each purchase in isolation. So it's not going to consider whether or not a shopper is likely to be a repeat purchaser, whether or not they're likely to be a high value shopper that buys more premium priced products that you sell over time, whether they're going to buy other products in other categories that you may sell. And so if you think about like those two major limitations, if you have ROAS as your main metric, you're likely going to be trading off long-term growth for short-term gains today. And that's going to put you certainly at a disadvantage.
I like how we think about what is actually being missed when ROAS becomes like just the main focus. So let's go a step further. From your work with your clients, what are some real world consequences when you just focus on ROAS?
Yeah. Well, whether it's intentional or not, if you're anchored on ROAS, you're likely to build a very narrow and a very shallow purchase funnel. So let's talk through more explicitly some of the things that I hit on. You're going to be investing at the bottom of the funnel. Because you're focused on ROAS, all of those investments at the bottom of the funnel are going to look like your most effective investments. And that can work for a period of time, but that only works for as long as there is demand at the bottom of the funnel to benefit from. At some point, that's going to dry up. And because you haven't been making those mid to upper funnel investments to build your brand, to build mental availability, you have no shoppers to pull down in the funnel. And so what we've seen brands often do is they're then scouring the bottom of the funnel and they're trying to find places to invest, and they're typically going to do so at lesser and lesser returns. And then they'll get to a point where they say, hey, I don't think I can scale my brand effectively anymore. And meanwhile, their competitors who are building more robust and dynamic funnels that are constantly replenishing the top of the funnel, pulling shoppers down, those are the ones that are going to be at a structural advantage and more set up for long-term market share gains.
Yeah, I think we've really set the tone on how ROAS doesn't really show the big picture, basically, and the limitations on scaling. So help me out then. What should brands be measuring? Instead of, on top of, or around?
ROAS has its place, but we feel really passionate about a proprietary metric that we've built called return on consumer. And what that metric is aiming to do is kind of reject the question of what did this ad return for me today, and instead ask, how did this ad contribute to long-term shopper value for me? And the way that it does that is it takes all of the shoppers in your purchase funnel, so basically anybody who's been exposed to an ad from your brand, and it places a 12-month sales forecast on all of those shoppers. And it looks past beyond just a single purchase. It considers repeat purchase, it considers cross-sell and upsell, all in that 12-month sales forecast. And so it's a much more forward-looking and holistic metric than ROAS or frankly even customer lifetime value, which is a fantastic metric, but it's backwards looking. And so when we can anchor customers on this metric, return on consumer, we can help brands proactively think about how they can progress shoppers through the funnel and still stay very focused on a long-term sales forecast.
How do we translate this to real life? Can you give us an example of how this changes the way you evaluate a campaign, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, measurement changes pretty dramatically. If you're thinking about it from a ROAS standpoint, you're going to be saying, I spend $1, what do I get back in sales? Do I get it today, tomorrow, within a week? It's all short-term time frame. And as we've discussed, that's very limiting for anything other than a true bottom of funnel optimization tactic. With return on consumer, because you're able to see that long-term 12-month sales forecast, you're thinking about your investments holistically. You can start to say, okay, I have a number of different ad strategies and ad tactics that I want to employ. I can now see how they add shoppers to my purchase funnel at the top of the funnel. I can see how those investment strategies move shoppers through the funnel. I can see how, as I become more effective at moving them through the funnel efficiently, my long-term sales forecast is growing. And so all of these investments that might have seemed shaky or uncertain before, now they're anchored on a metric that can be applied across the entire purchase funnel. They seem clear, they seem rational, and they're all backed in a sales forecast that you can validate over time.
How do you make this happen, though? Like, how is this even possible? Is this where Amazon Marketing Cloud AMC comes in?
Yeah, I mean, none of it would be possible without AMC. I mean, AMC is at the heart of what return on consumer is. Because AMC allows us to see those aggregated shopper level insights and see how consumer paths to purchase differ, we can understand which paths to purchase are efficient, which ones are not so efficient, which ones are really good at acquiring new to brand shoppers or high value shoppers. Where do shoppers drop off in the purchase funnel? That's the core value that we get from AMC that allows us to build this long-term sales forecast. If we didn't have that, it's no hyperbole at all to say AMC as a metric, ROC as a metric, it certainly wouldn't exist.
The metric sounds pretty game-changing. But I imagine there must be some pushback from brands, though, on making this shift. How do you tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be uncomfortable. I mean, what we're trying to do is we're trying to rethink entrenched habits. It starts all with education. Where I like to start all of these conversations and where our team likes to start all of these conversations is, what is a brand's long-term growth objective? And then can we align on the fact that measuring ads from a short-term standpoint is not going to help us get there. Once we can get to that place of alignment, we can open the door to return on consumer as a metric. We can start educating that brand on what their current shopper purchase funnel looks like, and the fact that the way that they're investing their ad dollars is not helping them to add more shoppers into the purchase funnel and move them through that purchase funnel effectively. One of the other things that I love about the education piece and how we tie it to return on consumer is it is by nature a proactive and forward-looking metric. And so we don't have to say, okay, you have to be all in on this, and then we'll tell you in 6 to 12 months whether or not this worked. We can make incremental steps, and within a month, we can show you, have you been able to add more shoppers to your purchase funnel? Have you been able to move them through effectively? It all comes together in that longer-term sales forecast, and it moves to a culture of long-term investment and overall brand building.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right, meeting brands, people where they are at. I think in the end, though, brands really want to know what kind of impact this will have on them. Do you have any idea of what this could be?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we get past the point of test and learn and we start applying this across a brand's entire way of thinking on their overall ad investments, we're fundamentally looking at success differently. We're anchored and focused on sales growth, but we're thinking of it through the lens of shopper acquisition into the funnel, shopper progression through the funnel, loyalty over time. Those are our leading indicators of success. And then the way that you think about budget allocation and the way that you think about growth levers and certainly bottom of funnel optimization and ROAS, all of that changes dramatically. ROAS plays a role, but it ends up playing a dramatically smaller one. And so if we can get to a point with a brand where we start to think about this long-term over time, we've seen one instance with a brand where over a 6-month period, we were able to increase their total sales 28%. And over that same period, we were able to increase their new to brand shoppers by 42%. And what I love about sharing that is I didn't say anything about return on consumer. Return on consumer helped us get there, but we are fully anchored in long-term sales growth. So return on consumer is a mechanism, but we want to ensure that all of the brands we work with are aligned with us on long-term sales growth as the objective. And that's real structural enhancements that certainly change the game for how brands think about their structural competitiveness.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important to have these success stories on top of your test and learn approaches. Well, that was a lot of great information, but Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I mean, ROAS isn't going away. It shouldn't go away. It has a very specific role to play. There's a reason it's had so much staying power in the industry, why it has such a gravitational pull on everyone who's in the industry. And it's a very effective tool for bottom of funnel measurement, but it is not effective enough to guide a modern ad strategy. And so that's where we believe a metric like return on consumer comes in. That's where we believe we're able to guide brands to stay anchored on long-term sales growth, but use leading indicator metrics that can be applied across an entire shopper purchase funnel, where you're not grasping at proxy metrics. You're not arbitrarily saying that top of funnel or middle of funnel investments don't work because they're not tied to ROAS or they don't show ROAS. And so we feel like when we can get brands to that place, we can drive results that improve performance today and set up a brand for long-term growth.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly said. That shift from short-term ROAS to a lifetime value is really the kind of mindset that sets aside growing brands from stagnant ones. So thank you again so much, Joseph, for joining us and taking us through this.
Thank you for having me. This was fantastic.
For sure. And thank you as well to all our viewers. And we'll see you next time on another episode of In the Know.